So, we are going to continue our discussion about the body. I just got back from a week long meditation and healing retreat. So, today should be interesting. I'm reflecting on a lot of things right now, and I want to invite us all into a space today. I have my Gene Keys book open, and I am on the 60th key, The Way of Realism. And this is what's currently active right now as we're recording this episode and our part two episode. And in here, I'm looking at this one line that just really struck me because it seems to be coming up over and over around me. So I kind of want to just share this little bit and then lead us all into getting grounded. Limitation is not the enemy. Our attitude is the potential enemy. If we succumb to the forces of limitation, we'll find that we can't breathe, expand, or evolve. There are forces in the universe bent on pulling us backwards, gravity being one. Perhaps we can begin to glimpse why this is the gift of realism. There's an upward force in our nature, a drive to extend, evolve, stretch, reach, and fly. But there's also a counterforce of constriction, limitation, pessimism, resignation, and tightness. And it's interesting because my voice was not like this before I got on the call. We're caught between these forces just as Gaia is caught within the net woven from the darkness of space and the light of sun. So as we are exploring our bodies, our manifested energy, I would like us all to just take a moment and take that breath in appreciation of all that we can bring into our body, all that is around us that is unseen. The fifth dimension exists around us. The wind exists where we cannot feel it on our bodies, but it is still there. The radio frequencies are all there. Love, sadness, hate, confusion, joy, peace, they're all around us in this outer layer. And when we breathe, we're breathing that in. And when we breathe out, we're also having an exchange. The exhale is just as important as the inhale. What we choose to take in and integrate, and what we choose to express out of us. That's part of our third dimension, our manifested physical bodies. So just having an awareness that all possibilities are just outside of us. And we can choose what we want to tune into, to bring into us the vibration that we want to harmonize with. And that is ever more present in our bodies, what we're choosing to harmonize with, what we're choosing to tune ourselves to outside of us, inside of us. So each time we take a breath, we have an opportunity to make a choice as to what we're tuning ourselves to. And each time we exhale, we're letting a little bit of us go and a little bit of the old story die. Both are needed. Neither is right or wrong. That resistance that we have with limitation, judgments about our bodies, thoughts and beliefs about what makes us okay or not okay, are an important part of the process. Understanding what we don't want is as important for us to be able to understand what we do want inside of our bodies and what we're choosing to attune ourselves to. So just taking in that awareness. And what we choose to let go of with each breath. Let's begin. So I
feel like that there's something on my screen. I was thinking about talking about, since obviously we're on the bodies, about who are our bodies for and what are our bodies for. So who wants to go first? And also, how have we been conditioned for what our bodies are for and who they are for?
That's what I was going to offer.
Yeah, like where are you now and where were you, kind of thing.
Yeah, can I start? Is that okay?
Yeah.
That was the first thing that came into my mind, was the evolution of appreciating my body for like its function rather than its appearance, and how so much of my life has been focused on its appearance and what it could do for other people and how it could perform. And I think like pregnancy really gave me a great opportunity to like witness the magic. I just remember being pregnant and thinking, well, first, it took so long to get pregnant. So I really, really cherished that. I'm sure every mom does cherish it, but it was very heightened for me. And like, just always being like, my mind is blown. Like, this thing can create another being, and I didn't even have to do anything, right? Like, I didn't have to tell it to feed it or grow it or anything. It just like magically occurred. So that was probably like the first space that I can remember, like, oh, thank you, body. In this work, like this path of mindfulness has really brought me back to like just the daily appreciation that's available for like the breath and the heartbeat. Of course, people in my life have become ill, and so it like heightens that appreciation as well. But I think my most recent evolution or like topic to evolve through is the objectification. And like my whole life was in sports of some sort. Like I wasn't like a high level athlete, but I was always in a sport. And there always seemed to be another person that was more elite, and their body was always like the thing that got communicated, right? Like, look at that girl's legs, and look at that girl's arms, and look at her waist. And it like that was the mode of communication. And so I feel like I'm doing a lot of unprogramming, a lot of deconditioning to, when I look at my body in the mirror, that I don't look at it in disgust because I don't have that like 19-year-old version of my body. And like recreating this new love and connection with it, which is like coming back to like answer your question. It's like now seeing that my body is mine, and like it's a vessel for my pleasure and my being, and that it doesn't have to belong to anybody else and be for anybody else. And that's like a whole new perspective for me, definitely.
Brenda,
Yeah.
do you want to go?
Sure. I also have when I'm getting ready to look in the mirror, my brain flashes to that 19-year-old body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you take that look in the mirror and it's like, whoa, that is not what I remember.
Yes.
So I'm coming to appreciate all that this body has done for me for all the years that I've been living in it. And I've come to a realization recently, very recently, that it is mine for pleasure, and it's mine to choose to offer as a gift to my partner. And that's not an obligation.
Mhm.
And where I came from in the evolution of that, was brought up the woman slash the wife slash the partner is to be subservient to the man and his needs, wishes, wants, whatever. And that's where I came from that perspective.
Mm.
So if I was approached, I'll just call it playtime because that's not going to offend anybody. When I was approached for playtime, I felt obligated to participate and to put my needs second. Like, no, I'm really not wanting to do that right now. But it's a totally different perspective to look at it as, yes, I choose to do this. I choose to offer. I choose to participate. And that is very freeing for me. And it doesn't feel as heavy, if I can put it into those words. I have a different, I don't know if this is the right place to bring it up, but I have a different perspective also on my body because there's been a lot of physical issues that have manifested over the course of my life. And it's not, Tanya, I think the words you helped me use was, it failed me. It let me down, or that's the perception that I had, that it let me down. I loved my first pregnancy, right? That was an intentional pregnancy. My second one wouldn't change a thing for the world, but it wasn't intentional. It happened. And because my children are only 16 months apart, I had medical issues come up from being that close together. And when I gave birth to my second child, I was told, if you have another child within 10 years, you're going to wind up in a wheelchair because I had all the cartilage in my pelvis was not happy. And so that was like the first thing my body couldn't do right. I couldn't even have babies, which correctly, this is the judgment that's going on at the time in my life. I'm 23 years old and my body has let me down, and went ahead right away and had tubal ligation because I didn't want to run the risk of winding up in a wheelchair. And then there have been several things, and most of it I can now tell you in hindsight and reflection that those things were primarily stress induced, as choices I made and career things that I was doing was high stress. And then the next major thing that happened was my discs started calcifying in my neck. And I spent years in significant pain, and I wound up having surgery and all that stuff. So that there's just been things that I have done to myself. Now I can appreciate that, but that wasn't where I was then. It was just the body's just not holding up for me. It's falling apart. And so there's been a lot of negativity towards, what good are you if you can't even just function normally in life? Tons more stories than that, but I'm growing to appreciate the fact that those things that did happen had a self-induced, some of them had a self-induced, like the stress and other things that I know had negative impacts on my physical side, to the point of the body saying, enough, time out. And if you're not going to listen, I'm going to just get louder and louder and louder. So I don't know that answered the question, but I'm talking about how I view my body and the evolution of said feelings.
I want to suggest that there is no offendable space. When you said like the playtime is not going to offend anybody, I was like, girl, you are in a wide open, bring it on, unoffendable space.
I know, but others will be watching this and who knows how old they are. And
that's okay. That's okay. I'm pretty sure that's like the most natural interaction amongst humans. So,
yeah. And for a lot of people, it's not always playtime.
That's true. I will kind of add on to what Brenda was saying, like feeling that obligatory energy, like that obligation, and getting into the space of saying no and not feeling, being willing to hurt my husband's feelings because he perceived that as rejection. And it was just like, no, it's actually me saying yes to me And when I want to say yes to you, I'm going to be like all in, but when I say yes out of obligation, I'm like, they're like 10%, and then, yeah, that just opens up a whole nother element of challenge.
So, Erin, the question you had was, who are our bodies for? I'm going to let my voice sort of be my guide. If it decides that I shouldn't be talking as much, I'm going to listen to that. I have so many things I want to share on this thought. One of the things that I was repeating over and over this last week is I do believe that we create our own reality. And so I've been pondering, when does that start? When we hit a certain age, I realized that for me, my belief is that that started from the day that I actually started coming into physical form, which would then mean that I chose my parents, that I chose the experience that they were going to gift me. But through much of my younger years, that looked like not so much a gift as it did a shadow. With my body, for the longest time, I thought it was not my own. It did not belong to me. I did not own it. I did not have agency over it. It belonged to everyone else. It belonged to the man that I needed to attract, or the friends that I needed to get their attention. It belonged to shame. It belonged to everyone and everything but me. It wasn't until I was in my 50s that I started to realize, this isn't true anymore. And it has been 3 years of dismantling so many of those beliefs. And I have seen how many physical conditions have been connected to those beliefs. For example, a couple of years ago, I had an experience where I had an unexplainable phenomenon happen in my body. And I had just started meditating, and meditation is basically getting to know thyself. And I had a lot of emotional stuff that was coming up at that time. And in resolving some of those emotional issues, I realized that even though my husband has never, ever pressured me for sex, there was this underlying duty, obligation that if I wasn't pleasing him, then where was my value? Where was my purpose? That led to chronic UTIs and the emotion of not being able to express my passion, which on the flip side of passion, passion is the inhale, anger is the exhale. It's the dark side of passion. I was told as a kid, you better stow that anger. Like it's not okay for me to be angry, which led to kidney stones, like literally creating boulders in the part of my body that's designed to have power. So as I have taken back ownership of my body, my bowels being another one, we're about to talk some shit, literally and figuratively. I had a experience when I was younger where I don't honestly remember if I told the person I was with, this wasn't my mother, it was the woman she was seeing at the time, if I told her that I needed to go to the bathroom or what was happening. It was not a healthy relationship with this woman. She had a lot of expressed jealousy with the relationship between me and my mom. It was sort of this triangle. But I had apparently pooped my pants when I was a kid. And I do vividly remember being sent to go to the shower to clean my dirty ass up. I was left alone. I'd never taken a shower before, which sounds like a weird thing, but I was afraid of the drain. I was afraid of like this part of me being washed away. All I'd ever taken was baths before then. And I was told to get in the shower and clean my stinky self up. So ever since then, I've had this experience of like, I had terrible IBS of diarrhea when I was younger. And that was all like the lack of safety. That was my body continuously. You know, when we're in fight, flee, or freeze, the body naturally wants to evacuate the bowels to make you lighter and faster. Like, we don't have time for digestion. So off I would go. Well, that then came to be like, I can't exist in this world. I either cannot eat for fear of having to go to the bathroom like immediately afterwards, or I have to learn how to hold this in, like stowing my anger. So, pretty much from the time I was in my late 20s, early 30s through 50, I then had constipation issues, like uncomfortably so. And it was all of that constriction, that holding in. I noticed it I noticed it show up with our daughter and with my husband. Like, one of the things when you're constricting your bowels is you can sometimes have some really nasty gas. And I, was always taught to be a lady. Like, we don't toot, we don't fart, we don't express, we don't burp in front of other people, or we ask to be excused. And oh my gosh, the horror. And I remember one of the first conversations that Erin and I had, we were talking about burping and farting and shitting. And she was like, I gotta go poo. I'm gonna go have my poop. And I was like, what? I was on so many different medications for my bowels. And both of the medications that I tried, when my doctor was trying to help me fix what was going on in my intestinal tract, ended up making me shit myself. And it was the most humiliating and embarrassing thing, even though nobody witnessed it but me. I was once again that little girl who shit her pants in the shower, washing myself clean. There's so much shame around that. And so when our daughter was home, it's interesting. We go back to that place of resonance where we last left it. And some of the things that had happened before she got home was me learning how to fart in front of my husband. Me being like, oh, I'm in a new situation right now and I'm feeling uncomfortable and I got to boo. Yes, again, yes, again, yes, again. And being able to tell him that. I remember being in Florida just 2 months ago, I think. We were going to the boat show and I was nervous and excited about all of the things. And I had pooped my pants right before we left. Went in, cleaned that up, came back out. We left for the show. I thought I was good. We got 15 minutes later and I was like, I gotta go again. And my husband and I were on this like wild goose chase trying to find a public restroom. And in that moment, I was starting to come to a place of compassion for my body. Jesus, little girl, what have you been through? The shame, the like what you've believed about yourself. No wonder you would feel this way. And having my husband being like, there's a public restroom right here on the Google Maps, and then having it disappear and him going, I don't know what happened. Okay, I'm gonna find the next one. I'm gonna find the next one. And he was so compassionate. When our daughter came home, I realized that all through her growing up, she got shamed about passing gas or any of those kinds of things. And I realized the root of that back to my childhood. So, like all of these body issues and things that we have, I have now come to a place where I see it completely differently. Like, as we're letting go of these old stories, the shame, the obligation, the lack of ownership, the lack of connection, the things that we've seen as separating us from love and connection, from being who we are, being able to just, like, we're in human bodies, folks. We're gonna fart, we're gonna burp, we're gonna make smells, we're gonna do all kinds of things. And we need love and compassion, we need connection. But when we compromise ourselves in order to have this false connection, we then are giving our bodies away. So my body belongs to me. I am the creator of it. I have been since day one. But I had to have all of these experiences that I've had in life: thyroid issues, bowel issues, bone issues, stone issues. Like, I feel like I get hey issues, oh issues, like all the bullshit issues.
Please let this be your next TikTok or your first TikTok. Do it. Triple dog dare you. Come on.
Like, just seeing how I actually needed to go through all of those different experiences to understand and have compassion for other people that have had problems with their lungs, like being able to express who they are and feel like they're safe. Like, we have to find our safety within and realize that we are the owners of these bodies. And when we have true freedom is when we can be just accepted for our brilliance, our genius, our love, as it is in this human body, however the fuck it shows up. So this body is mine. And I spent 51 years creating it out of lack and what I thought everybody else needed it to be. And I have now shifted, and I am creating this body out of unconditional love and what I want it to be. So there you go. Next.
So as Tanya already said, it's interesting. I have always felt like my body is my own. And then there has been this undertone, or maybe a not an outright saying, but kind of when me and my dad have talked before, kind of like, and I'm very much paraphrasing, right? But like having a good relationship with your husband. And I have always enjoyed having sex. I've always enjoyed experiencing pleasure in my body. But it wasn't until I hired a coach where she was like, you are never responsible for your husband's penis. And I was like, what? Like, I know that I'm not, but like, what? Like, and I've always felt like I can say no, and I have, but just like you, Christy, have said before, like, listen, if that's, and that was also part of why, because through conversations that I've had is like, if men want to pleasure themselves, then I, or as a spouse, you've done something wrong if they're doing that because you're not meeting their needs. So I had a lot of story around that with Jason early on. And so it wasn't until I hired the coach that I was like I said, I always felt like I could say no and would say no, but I think the true empowerment came at that point. Like, no, we can have like honest conversations, and he and I are really good about having like deep conversations, but just having it from that view. And I think also from a man's perspective, it's like, look at what they have been bombarded with of like what sex is like, or what, it's just like having compassion for my spouse, right? Like, even though he's like the best student, he also has been taught that, it's a certain way, or that, you know, so when you said, Christy, that it took you a while to get pregnant, and that when you were pregnant, you were in such awe. It's kind of like you have to see that contrast, because I remember working out in CrossFit being so angry because I couldn't run. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, my body is not my own right now. And I was very angry about it. I remember like having lunch with a girlfriend. She was like, "You are so angry. Like, this is supposed to be one of the happiest times of your life, and you are so mad." And looking back now, right, like, I see why, because if that has, for me, and what I felt like at the time, like, so many things changed in my body. I had to drop my weights. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't, like, so there were times that, like, you can't sleep, or Jason's pulling me out of the bed because I'm so big. It's just like, when does my body get to be my own again? And I'm sure you with twins, right, Christy? Like, I'm not even.
Oh my gosh. And then the nursing, I'm like, that's a
Oh,
whole
yes.
nother level of
Yes.
like, not my body. Like, what
Yes.
is actually
Yes.
happening?
Human
Yes.
pacifier. Mhm.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh. I
Mhm.
felt like really a milking cow. Like, I just was always
Yes.
pumping and
Yes. Yeah. So I think, like, I don't think that was talked about. And I always remember, like, I had read a book, like Jenny McCarthy. I just saw it in the house we're staying at. She actually had it. I'll have to look at what the book is called. But I read it and I was like, why isn't everyone talking about this? Like, everyone, like, fantasizes pregnancy, but they don't talk about the other part of it, right? Like, for me, it was very much like, I didn't get to it wasn't my own during those 9 or 10 months, right? And nursing, and my boobs, and just all of the things that, if you're used to experiencing your body the way you want to, and then you don't get to, right? So that was, and looking back now, and like having compassion for Aaron, that just didn't know that there was, a way to, like, I had so much anger within me. And also, like, Tanya, when you talk about being shamed for pooping and things of that sort, I have always been open about that. Like, we talk very openly in my family, my immediate family, about going poop, what our poop looks like. It's a dinner table conversation. There's no, like, conversation that's off limits. And I remember when Grayson had our lady that helped us take care of her, I would always ask, like, so what was her poop like today? And she was like, you're the only person that's ever asked me, like, what? And I'm like, it tells us everything. I want to know, how many times did she poop? What did it look like? All the things. So in our immediate family, we always talk about poop, and we fart, and we go to the bathroom and the door's open sometimes. Like, there's nothing that's off limits. But I do remember my mom, when I was growing up, if I would burp or you fart or anything like that, that's not ladylike. And I think it would be interesting to explore. I think my mom is, if we talked about love and power before, my mom is power, probably, and I am too. And so it was just like a battle. I didn't take the back seat when she said that. Mine was more like, well, then you can go in another room, because this is what I'm going to do, and this is what my body wants to do in this moment. But I could see how being parented that way could, like you, Tanya, get you to that place of, like, that's shameful that you burp, or that you fart, or that and when you were saying, all of our bodily functions, it's like, they're all bodily functions. We just have different ideas and thoughts about burping versus farting. And that's what makes it not okay to do in public, right? We were bike riding through, I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, Cartier, or it's like an acronym, CATIE. And we stopped at the little, I guess, clubhouse. It's like it's like nationally known in Latin America for, like, all of the flowers and the plants and the trees and all of this. And I like seltzer water. So we all got a seltzer water, and our guide afterwards, I was like, it was super bubbly. Jason's like, I can't drink all this. It's super bubbly. So I finished his. And then afterwards I burped really loudly, and he was like, oh, you liked it. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, when you burp here, that means, like, you enjoyed your food. And I thought, oh, isn't that fascinating? Like, here, that's like a compliment. He's like, that's really, like, people like it when you do that, versus in America, it's like shameful, or, you're not allowed to that's
Rude.
not ladylike, right? And how come it's not ladylike for us to do that, but then as men, that's totally okay. So I think, where my body is now, it's definitely for my own pleasure, for my own existence. And also, teaching Grayson, like, one of the things that we kind of say in our house is like, this is my beloved body. You have to ask me if you want to touch. We joke like, Jason used to like just touch my boobs. And I'm like, now that Grayson's old enough, I'm like, this is my beloved body. You have to ask first. And so teaching her, like, that's hers to enjoy, to, she'll dance in the mirror naked and I'll dance with her. It's just that experience of having our bodies, and our bodies were made for us, not for, I think we're all saying the same thing, right? Like, made for us, not anybody else. And like Brenda said, like, if I choose to experience anything with my partner, that is a gift that I'm giving, not an obligation.
There's a couple things I want to circle back to. This is one of those moments where I'm like, I would love if we had some men available to share their bodily experiences, as far as like, we think about how oftentimes boys are raised, the expectations, how they show their emotions, what they're, if they're supposed to be like virile men, whatever that is. Just, yeah, I'm having a moment where I wish there were some men available. And I also, it hasn't slipped by my awareness that all four of us that are currently present on this call, we've had various fertility challenges. I myself have had 4 miscarriages. I know Christy's had some issues, and several of us have had issues, but we all have been able to have a child. And something you said, Brenda, about the betrayal just brought me back to that point of, I remember when I was going through that, I was feeling so ultimately betrayed by my body when I miscarried. I had 1 before our daughter's birth and then 3 more afterwards. And I just remember thinking, I can't even do this right. Like, my body can't even do this right. But I ponder, you all know, I hypothesize that survival of my body's betraying me. I have no control over this. Like Christy, you said, I didn't have to like do anything to make this pregnancy happen. It just happened. Just wanting to maybe explore that idea of the pressures that we put on ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves, the stress that we put ourselves under, and how then that oftentimes creates things within the body that are maybe like, oh, maybe this wasn't my intention to create this, but this is what ended up happening. So
I think pregnancy just in general, well, and I know you all know a lot of my story, and sometimes I'm hesitant to share, because when we were going through fertility treatments, my husband was like, how about you not like tell all of our business? And I'm like, oh yeah, I forget, like, you're also a part of this. There was so much like, this has to work, right? Like, just like really gripped so tight on everything working, feeling like I was in control. Obviously I wasn't. I was putting things into play that put me in a position of feeling like I was in control. But then, exactly like what you were saying, once we did actually get a positive pregnancy, it was like, what can I do to make this last? Right? Like, just hanging on to it. I remember I was a high risk because of being in fertility, and then also with twins. The doctor was like, you just have to chill out. Like, stop waiting for that other shoe to fall. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have that skill. Like, where is the off button in my brain? Because really and truly, like, you telling me to chill out just gave me another job to do that I don't know how to do. I don't know how to make this body make a baby. And now you want me to chill. It's not going to happen. So yeah, so curious how that contributed. Like my children had to be birthed early because my daughter didn't grow. Like she had what they call interuterine growth retardation, which is just like kind of, she stopped growing. So they felt they could better serve her outside of my body than inside of my body. So of course, like I did it wrong, like that martyrdom. And then come the nursing, like my only job to provide for these children. And, they put all the pressure of like, nurse your baby, it's the best, blah, all kinds of pressure. And I couldn't produce enough to keep up with them. And just like trying so hard to stimulate my body and take the herbs and the this and the that's and measuring everything and being like, yep, not enough again, and just like extra stress on top of that. I have so much compassion for moms that are in that space because yes, we do have this new kind of phenomenon coming through, like breast is best, but then like formula is okay too. But there's so much language that's very confusing in my opinion, because you're like, okay, so this is best. Doesn't that mean this isn't? And I can't produce that. There's nothing you could, well, I guess you could like get, what's it called? Like surrogate milk or something, like donor milk, but I didn't know about that. Anyway, just like thinking about that stress, and I have no idea what it actually manifested, but I do know I was stressed out 100% of the time. And I do remember my mother coming into my room while I was nursing both of my children at the same time. And she was like, isn't this just the most magical thing? And I was like, no. And if you don't get out of my room, I might throw something at you. Like the amount of pressure in my body, like I could cry just thinking about it. Like I feel it immediately. And my children are almost 15 years old. It's
I was
such a
going to say,
crazy
what about
memory.
compassion for you?
Oh,
Compassion
believe
for-
me. Like, and I feel like I could probably go back and do so much compassion work just through that whole space, because I know that I was actively doing my best, right? Like I did everything that I knew how. The only thing I didn't know how to do was give up and to say, no, I've had enough. My body cannot produce this anymore. I stuck with it till September, so that they were born in February, so like 6 months. And I mean, even taking a pump to work, like just all the things. Yeah.
That's another place where mine failed me. So my son was born. We go back to the doctor, whatever the checkup periods are, and he lost significant weight.
Mhm.
And the doctor told me, you're going to kill this child. We're going to take him away from you. Like I was intentionally neglecting him, and my body just was not producing. And at that moment, I had to switch to formula. But there's all the background noise of mother's milk. And it's like, I'm going to ruin this child because I can't do it right. So it's another place where, doing it wrong, or the body just, I don't know why I couldn't, but the body just couldn't. And so when I had my second child, I didn't even try. I don't know if things had changed, but I was just like, I'm not going through that again. And I just stopped. And, there was a lot of internalizing that failure of, you're not good enough. You can't be a good mom because you can't even feed your kid, and there's a whole lot, might have been my age having a lot to do with it, because I was 22, 23, and a lot of women wait till later, but I did the best I could, but my body didn't do what it was supposed to do, or what I believed it was supposed to do, and couldn't. And yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for people who are on that. I totally believe if you can, right? I'm not proud of the fact that I have bottle babies, but that's what had to happen at the time for them to thrive. And I think it's unfair that there's the stigma of that, because it's not my fault the body didn't cooperate. And there's probably reasons why it didn't cooperate if we went back and looked at things, but at the time it was devastating, totally devastating.
This
Feel
is
like-
where,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I feel like these types of conversations where we can hold that space for each other and there isn't the judgment, right? Like, Brenda, when I hear you say, like, I'm not proud of having a bottle baby, I'm like, I'm so proud of you for keeping your babies alive. Like, what a beautiful opportunity you just gave them, right? Like, you didn't force your breast to do it incorrectly or whatever, right? Like, they
Right.
weren't working for you.
But that's all I'll call it media. I don't know what the right word is, or the expectation
Yes.
that if you can't, people don't look at the can't. They looked at it
Oh.
as a choice, right? It's like, I chose to have bottle babies and therefore I was a lesser of a mom. And that may have not been any perception of anybody else, but that's definitely what was going on up here, is that, people didn't know that my body didn't do it. So I was just having bottle kids and that I was taking the easy way out, which absolutely wasn't, but it's a perception.
What I was going to offer is, this is where I want to almost circle back to where we started. Like, whose body is this? Who does it belong to? And I ponder, I hypothesize that sometimes we have to have these experiences so that we can start breaking up the narrative that we have glued to them. The experience of, whether you bottle fed or whether you didn't, the experience of whether you were able to carry them full term or not even have them at all. Oftentimes we're taking in what a doctor says. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that there is definitely an advantage to medicine, but one of the words that people miss is practicing medicine. I have had so many doctors over the course of my lifetime tell me things as if they were like, this is how it is, cut and dried. Like, they know me, my body, better than I could know it. And for 50 plus years, I believed that to be true. Like, I remember going to the doctor when I was a teenager and I was having all kinds of hormonal issues and horrible periods, and just like, I would have what I would call like rage moments. And we needed to get me on the pill because of how much I was bleeding out early on. And I was told that really what I needed was an antidepressant. Or I remember going to, when I very first started having the constant UTIs, once I became sexually active and I started having constant UTIs, because I wasn't having sex for me. I was having sex because that's how I got love and attention. I remember a doctor telling me, oh, well, your anatomy is messed up. And so they did some archaic procedures on me. I won't even go into the details because just the sheer explanation of it elicits a great deal of pain. But I started believing all of these things that the doctor would tell me about, my body, what it was capable of. And maybe some of that was true. Maybe it was true in the moment, or maybe it was just them observing where my beliefs were in that moment. As I have taken ownership and belief back in my body and what I choose to believe it's capable of, I'm also starting to notice physical shifts, like eradicating all the kidney stones that were never able to leave my body before. things like my thyroid being healed, things like um, my hormonal issues being healed. So many things that were all kind of held for a certain while in the beliefs that the doctors gave me as, well, this is it. So perhaps Brenda, the exploration of what makes a good mother, and Christy, what defines us as good mothers? What defines us as being able to do it the right way? Just because the right way for someone else is that way, or maybe there are a number of people that a certain way seems the right way, who's to say that's what's right for us? And when we choose to accept someone else's shame or judgment that we're doing it wrong, then we feel that betrayal. And then we're basically, our bodies no longer belong to us.
I remember like almost clearly that Rachel Hollis, I don't remember her first book.
Girls, stop apologizing.
Yes. I remember reading that. It was early in my like reading days. Like I had really basically just stepped into reading. And I remember reading that and her talking really openly about not loving the infancy like phase of her motherhood. And I was like, oh, wow. Like really kind of noticing a little bit of my own judgment towards that and thinking, interesting, right? Like here she is in this really vulnerable space, being honest with herself. And I'm sure getting a ton of backlash, right? But I was like, wow, that's so brave of her to say, because it's true. It's true for her. And for her to just be like, how about you just own whatever you love? Like, I love toddlers. I'm starting to kind of love teenagers, as weird as that is, but I feel like they're the same, toddlers and teenagers. But so many of my parents are like, when are we going to just get out of this phase? And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is the most fun. And they're like, nope. I liked them better when they were little. I liked them better. I can't wait for them to get older. And I thought it kind of brings me back to that same thing. Like, really, it is up to you to decide, like, what's your definition of a good mom, right? What's your definition of your favorite phase? And when we can start to own that for each other, like allow it to be, like I can say breastfeeding was I hated it. I'm proud of what I offered and sacrificed, but would I do it again? No, I would not do it again. It was horrible. So I feel like when I talk to parents, I'm like, do what feels best to you, right? Like that experience gave me the compassion to say that really genuinely to people.
I think
See,
you
I
do
would,
that. Oh, go ahead, Brenda.
I was to say, I go back to I'm one of those who don't like infants.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I'm just having this aha moment right now, and I'm wondering if I've always had that feeling because I feel like I failed so miserably
Right.
physically at that point, because I'll follow my previous story up with, okay, I had the bottle kid. And then the next thing that happened was I was feeding him wrong. The doctor yelled at me because he had ear infections all the time. So I couldn't even do that part, right? So I'm like, I think there's a whole storyline there of why I didn't enjoy infancy for my children. I always put it up to the fact that I didn't like them as vegetable matter and liked them when I could interact with them more. Because probably I was just working and working and working and working, trying to just keep them alive and doing it wrong, according to the doctors, that there was nothing to enjoy about the whole experience. So yeah, there's a
I know,
big aha moment here right now.
I know, Erin, you had something to say too, but I just want to slip something in right now. It feels like the perfect spot. I had the darkest and the lightest time when my daughter was a newborn, I hated how I felt internally. And at the same time, I looked at her and I was like, I never knew I could feel love like this. And then there were times that I looked at her that I was just like, I never knew I could feel pain and repulsion like this. And it was so confusing. Everybody was telling me, oh, this should be the most beautiful, happy time of your life. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me then? Because I'm like, can I put her back? Can I put her back? I was always one that thought, doesn't bother me to hear babies cry. I was not expecting that the first time I heard my daughter cry, that I would feel physically, violently ill inside. And what all of this comes back to, I'm realizing, is fear.
Mhm.
And as a tribe, we're afraid of doing it wrong. We're afraid of doing it different. We're afraid of doing it our way that is in any kind of opposition to what the tribe does, whether that be our community, our culture, our religion. Like, we are terrified of doing it different because we might get kicked out of the tribe if we're not doing it right, whatever right that is. And so I'm just realizing that, that disdain that I had for when she was a newborn, that not disdain, that chaos that I felt of like tremendous love and complete and like physically ill that would swirl around. That's one bitch of a cocktail.
Agree. Agree.
3 things. One, Christy, that's what I was going to say is like, you do that so beautifully, is like teaching parents, like they are the authority. They are the ones that know best. No doctor, no therapist, no nobody, right? Like whatever feels good to them. And it goes back, like whatever you just not whatever, but like everything you just said, Tanya, is like, we are taught that it has to be a certain way. So, we've talked about our bodies, like we should be grateful for our bodies because they do all these things but then we feel a certain way. It's like the same thing with child or having children, right? Like, so Tanya, I felt the same way of like, everyone says you're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to be so ecstatic about this baby. And you're like, but for me, it was like, it was both, right? Like I had the high and the low, the black and the white, the yin and the yang, whatever you want to call it. And no one can cause shame, right? We feel that internally because we have beliefs or thoughts around that. But when people are telling you that, because that's the way my mom was, like, oh, she just loved being a mom. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but this is not what I envisioned. And we can create that shame for ourselves because, once again, right, the tribe and the fitting in. And even so, you didn't say this, Tanya, but like even our spouses, like Jason lived to be a dad. And I'm like, I've missed something here.
You're like, I did not get that memo.
Yeah. Right. And to see him and to be crying and to have all of these emotions. And I'm like, I'm a terrible mom, right? There's something terribly wrong with me because we grow up in a society of like, it has to look like this. We have to be in this box, right? Or we're taught, right, that we should, and for fear of being ostracized or ousted or, way back when of the tribal, like Tanya was talking about, and just allowing everyone to just have their experience the way that they want to. And I think also like you join groups, you join places. Like I never connected with stay-at-home moms. And I always felt like the outsider, like I wasn't the working mom because I didn't, send my kid off to daycare, but I wasn't the stay-at-home mom. And I always felt like, well, where do I fit in? What do I talk about? I don't want to talk about my baby the entire time because that's what I felt like stay-at-home moms did. And then I didn't want to always talk about work when we went. So like, where do we fit in? And just allowing us to just be exactly where we are. And there's no, like, it's always a blank slate, right? Like, I don't think anyone really talks or shares that, and we look to, I think it's also, we don't feel safe within ourselves, right? There were many times like Grayson, whenever we, they lose weight. That's another story, right? Babies lose weight when they are born. Grayson never lost weight. Grayson gained weight. So then we go for our 2-week and she's gained like a pound. And I'm like, I think I need to start pumping. And the pediatrician's like, no. You're going to produce too much milk. And I'm like, yeah, but this kid is like eating every 2 hours, which that was wrong too, right? And I'm like, my baby's hungry. I'm going to feed her. Like, what do you, and just this constant not trusting ourselves because we think that the authorities, we can have a whole topic on medicine, but the authority, the authorities, when I say authorities, like the medical professional or whomever we're looking to for advice is like, what do we look to them because we've never done it before, but it's similar. And when we went river kayaking yesterday, he said, I can sit here all day and teach you. He's like, you just need to get into the raft and you just need to go down the river. And then we'll just work on it as we do it, And then as we went through the river again, he's like, see, I would have never been able to explain that to you had you not done it. And I was like, oh, that is like the perfect, metaphor for like, yeah, you just do the thing, right? And then you get to feel comfortable and ask your questions. But I think we look so much outside of ourselves because we don't know, versus not enough people are saying, yeah, I didn't know either. And you just do what feels good for you and trusting, that what's best for yourself. So
I'm on a major like soapbox right now about moms and babies and like nonverbal communication and the beauty of learning that language, learning that bond, because we're taught as a society, I was taught as a society that this book is going to tell you everything that you do in the first, 10 months or whatever. So anytime you have a problem, go to this book. And then you would go to the book and you would try it and it wouldn't work. And you're like, oh, I am wrong. My kid's wrong. Like something's wrong. It's definitely not the book, right? And then you learn it's the damn book. Like nobody knows that child. That child's never been in existence before. And then your parent presence is a whole different realm. It's like, who could have written a book about your individual parenting experience paired with these new children, right? Like it's never been done. And to think about building that intuition, like the highlight and like the listening and the experimentation and like, let's just figure this out together rather than like trying to get it right. This is like the biggest soapbox of my life, I feel like right now. And Brenda, I will say
over how.
Right. It's like just being, right? Instead of like trying to like rationally think about it, like get into your body and feel it. Brenda, I really feel like this is a childhood wound. When I was 12, my baby sister was born and she had a cleft lip and palate. And they sent her home with my mom. This was my mom's 4th child. And my mom had nursed all of us, hence her magical experience in her nursing. But so she was sent home to nurse this baby with a cleft lip and palate and no instruction. And so, of course, my sister lost weight because she didn't have the structures to form an adequate seal. And they shamed her. They shamed my mother for not being able to feed her child. And I'm like, hearing that even to this moment, I'm like, shame on you all for not helping her understand this. And can we not have more compassionate supports for these moms that are doing everything in their power to like bring life and feed life? And then we like smack them on the hand? Like, no. This is when like
You
we
couldn't
put
Google it back in those days.
Oh no, right?
Right? There was nothing except what medical professionals told you, or if it was in a book.
And there's so many, like as a speech therapist, knowing like the latch and the mouth and the structure and the coordination, like these babies do not have the innate skill to suck, swallow, breathe. It's so like, it's all a learning thing. And if we don't have those supports, how are we supposed to learn, right? Like it's not a shameful experience. It's like, let's be like embracing and compassionate. Ah, soapbox rant over.
But threaten a mom to take their baby away.
Right. No, absolutely not. I'm sorry.
Just
I'm
having-
sending you all the love.
I'm having a moment where I'm realizing, aside from the physical, the DNA, like our moms and our dads contribute half and half. So we are them, they are us kind of thing. We are of them. Even though we are creating our own reality, I completely believe that. If y'all don't, that's okay. But we still have that in our bodies, in our physical bodies, we still have that DNA memory. And I was just, as you were talking about that, Christy, I thought about the time when I took our daughter to the pediatrician. We didn't have problems with her gaining weight or anything like that. But guess what? The one thing that I remember getting shamed about from her pediatrician was she's not potty trained at the age she should be. We were having difficulty with getting her to potty train. So the urine and the bowels, and she had a UTI when she was like 3 years old. And so I'm just like, isn't this interesting? Like my issues get passed down into my daughter to some degree. And I've seen a number of these like sins of the mother and father kind of thing that get passed down into our children. And what a gift it is. I just want to give awareness to this moment. What a gift it is that we actually get to have this experience. Like Erin was saying about, this isn't something I could have explained to you had you not had the experience first on your own. If we hadn't had all of our collective experiences, pooping our pants, cleft lips, having the threat of our child being taken away from us, feeling like we had somehow missed the mark of what it means to be a good mom, that I should be feeling some way different than what I'm feeling, we wouldn't have the perspective, the wisdom, in the healing of, if we hadn't had these experiences, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now at all.
It's what you said at the beginning, right? We need the contrast. We need the opposite. I mean, how would we know what joy feels like if we never felt sadness? You have nothing to compare it to. And the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I want to come back to a statement, Erin, that you said, and I had to write it down because I knew I'd forget. But when you said no one can make you feel shame, I believe that now. But prior to coaching, I would have argued. I would have been like, you don't know what my body feels like when those people say those words to me, right? Like immediate shame response. And I feel like it's very liberating to know that people cannot make you feel shame.
Yeah.
Right? It's our belief of those words that they say to us that triggered that shameful response. And to me, that was one of the biggest gifts that I've been given through like mindset work, because I had a world of shame, like as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult. And in my 40s, I'm like noticing how much less shame response I have. And when I see my friends or even my children, anybody around me have that shame response, I'm like, wait a second. This is like love. Like I'm a space of love for you. This is not about pointing fingers or saying it's wrong. This is just like a space of awareness. So if you want to make a shift, here's something that you can change, right? Like you can't change something that you're not aware of. And I just love that so much. And I think that was just such a big space of practice because it was
Mhm.
such an automatic response for me. It was just like, oh, this person said something, I believe that, or, they're an authority, I have to believe it, it must be true. And it was just like, hey, what if you start asking yourself, like, does that even feel true to you? You know?